Hey, thanks for joining me. My name's Sarah Lemon. I'm the local meat marketing and capacity specialist with the Meat and Poultry Assistance Program, part of the Regional Markets Program within the WSDA. So following up from the great WA meetup we had with Don Marie Maurer from Department of Ecology on December 3rd, 2025, I wanted to make this video to continue to spread awareness about the open rulemaking process for WAC 173-350 related to the solid waste handling standards for organic materials. And hopefully demystify or make that process a little bit less daunting if that's something that you're interested in engaging with. So today, basically, I'm going to walk you through what the rulemaking process is, because I think that's really helpful for understanding how it works and why it looks the way it does. And then we'll dive into the WAC that's currently open for revision WAC 173-350. So first off, why should you care? Why should you take the time to dive into what is admittedly kind of a cumbersome process? Well, first of all, it's time sensitive. So the current comment period is open until December 12th. And there will certainly be another public comment period yet to be determined whether that will be formal or informal. But once this rule is finalized, it's going to be closed for quite a long time. The last revision to this rule, I think, was in 2018. So it's been a good 7 years since there's been able to be any changes. So whatever ends up in the final rule, you have to live with your business for the foreseeable future. Second of all, it's a great chance to learn about the regulations, understand what is being proposed, understand what the WAC says now, and understand how that can be applicable to you and your business. And then last, and perhaps most importantly, this is your chance to influence how rules and regulations are made in the state of Washington. So Department of Ecology has invited your feedback. They want to hear from you, things that you like about the draft language that's been proposed, things that you think could change to better suit your needs. And really, this is, your chance to influence our state rules and regulations. So that alone, I think, makes sense to engage if you have the time and the capacity. So what is rulemaking? Important to note that rulemaking is the process by which WACs are updated. So for reference, a WAC stands for Washington Administrative Code, and it's basically a rule or a regulation that's created by a state agency in order to implement a law or a statute. So that's an RCW, stands for the Revised Code of Washington. So WACs interpret laws, and the rulemaking process is a very formal process. I put some links on the bottom of the slide if you want to learn more about that process. But that is how we create rules and regulations here in the state of Washington. And so this point in time, we're looking at WAC 173-350, and we'll look at a couple of different sections in the course of this video, but I think it's helpful to understand what the numbers mean. And I like to think of this kind of like an address. So it tells you where in the big, long Washington Administrative Code you need to look to for the specific rules you're looking for. So the first three numbers, that's the title. The second three numbers are the chapter within that title. And then the last three numbers, and sometimes there's letters after that, like A, B, what have you, are the sections. So that dials you into exactly where in the code that you're looking, and helps you understand which pieces are being updated. So as I said, it's a very formal process. There's a number of ways that the process can go, and agencies kind of choose different pathways as they begin rulemaking processes. There's regulations for when you have to notify the public, when you have to notify different other offices within the state government. But basically, you can think of it in kind of 3 to 4 steps. So there's a triggering event. That could be that the legislature passes a new law. Sometimes there can be a petition to have a rulemaking. And after a triggering event, agency decides that they're going to undertake the rulemaking, they make an announcement. There's a formal way of submitting the proposal for the rulemaking session. And then they go into this rule drafting phase, which is really where we're at now. So Department of Ecology, in this sense, has taken the approach of having this iterative, informal period of comments and draft languages in hopes that they get the rule to a really good stage before they go into the formal proposal and then formal public comment period. That'll happen. Once that has happened, then the rule goes up for adoption, and basically that's the end of the process. So as I said, we are here in this announcement and rule drafting phase. So you'll see if you go to the Department of Ecology website, which I've linked in the follow-up email to the WA Meetup call, you can visit this website for the full draft language. And I encourage you to look at the full draft language. It's a 207-page document. I know that's daunting. There's lots of blue and red and all sorts of different types of text in there. But this is where you're going to find all of the information that you could possibly need to understand what changes are being proposed. So you can click that link, it'll take you to the website, or again, look in the email follow-up that I sent you all. For small and mid-scale farms, ranches, food processors, including meat processors, the folks that I work with mostly, I've highlighted just a couple of sections that I think are particularly critical. You'll note here that I put page numbers, and those reference the document that was live as of December 2025. If Department of Ecology updates that draft, there may be slightly different page numbers, so try not to get too discouraged by that. But I recommend looking at the definitions. Basically, most WACs have sort of a definition section, and then it gets into the heart of the matter of the rules and regulations. So there's things in here like what the definition of agricultural waste is, that could be important, or what the definition is for on-farm. What does it mean to have meat processing waste? So I encourage taking a close look at those definitions. And then also of particular interest, is the regulation section 220 related to composting facilities. This section also includes Table 220A, which are the terms and conditions for solid waste permit exemptions. So if you're a farm or a ranch and you either have mortalities on your farm or you're doing some small amount of meat processing, say you have a slaughter truck come, more than likely, depending on volume, you'll be eligible for one of these permit exemptions. So I think that's a great section to take a deeper dive into as you go through the whole rule. Additionally, if you plan on distributing any of the compost that you create, you'll want to take a look at the testing parameters because you'll be beholden to those. And then lastly, if you're interested in like black soldier fly production or vermicompost, or you're getting an aerobic thermophilic biodigester, you may want to look at Section 225, which refers to other organic handling activities. So if you're just composting or you're just taking your waste to landfill, or maybe you have a setup where you can take it to an anaerobic digester, this won't necessarily apply to you, but another good section to note. So that's a version of what the rulemaking process looks like. And so I just wanted to remind you that the informal comment period is happening right now. It'll be open until December 12th. And again, Ecology has invited comments from all sorts of different stakeholders on the rules. They'd love to know your thoughts about it, good, bad, indifferent. Let them know what you think if you would like to. An open opportunity there to engage with this rulemaking process. So I've provided a link to share your feedback. It's on the Department of Ecology website, also linked in that same email that I sent out. And then if that's enough for you and you're ready to go off on your own, please feel free to take a look at the rule, engage in the process if you'd like to. And if you want to stick around for another little bit, I'm going to dive into the document itself and just help do a little navigational orientation. So if that's it for you, thanks so much. Good luck with the process. If not, hang around and we'll look a little deeper. And of course, if you have questions about this or anything else related to your farm, ranch, or food/meat processing business, this is my contact information. I'm always here to help troubleshoot issues, help you understand regulations, and point you in the right direction. So thanks so much. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up the main Department of Ecology webpage. Again, I've shared links directly to the rulemaking page in the follow-up email, but if you end up just at ecology.wa.gov, I recommend scrolling down to the bottom and going right here to laws, rules, and rulemaking. And then you can see all of the open rulemaking. So if you're interested in something else about air and climate or water shorelines, these are all different types of rules that Department of Ecology is updating in some way right now. So the one we're interested in is here under waste and toxics. It's the solid waste handling standards for organic management. You can see where we're at in the process. You can see the timeline. So again, they're going to plan to do this this formal rule proposal, have public hearings, and then adopt the rule hopefully next fall. So if you keep scrolling down, you can get down to where we are, and you can see the latest edition of draft rule language from Department of Ecology. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So if you click on this, it opens this massive 207-page document. Again, try not to be discouraged. I'm going to point out some of the sections that I think are particularly relevant and of interest to small and direct marketing livestock farms and ranches. And again, just to orient you to this sort of document, black is all stuff that's staying the same, blue are new additions, and red are deletions. So sometimes you'll have sections that have just been moved around. I think that's something Dawn Marie mentioned in the webinar on December 3rd. So it actually looks like a lot more changes than are really happening. But again, I'm going to walk you through some of the sections that I think may be most relevant. Up at the top, you can also navigate directly to pages. So I've included some page numbers for folks for sections that are maybe particularly relevant. The first one that we're going to go to is on page 11. And this is the start of the definition section. So these are definitions that are for terms that are found in the subsequent rules. And so it's a great section in any sort of WAC or even an RCW to look at to say, hey, what are we actually talking about here? You can see many of these things have not changed, but if you scroll down, they've changed the definition of agricultural waste, so you can take a look at that. It does still include routine mortalities, but it does not include food processing waste, including animal or meat processing waste or mass mortalities. So I would just scroll through here. It's kind of interesting to see like what all they've defined. Again, some of it might not be super relevant. I don't really know what asphaltic materials are, but here you have a definition. Some of the other ones that might be interesting are, what is a bulking agent? That's something that anybody that's composting is going to need to have on hand, both to increase your carbon nitrogen ratio and increase porosity within your piles. So that's a good one to have kind of locked away. Clean wood waste might be relevant. Apologize for the scrolling. There's not really a better way to do this. Go through some of this stuff. Food waste, that could be relevant, especially if you're doing things in addition to meat processing, like you're making jams or something. Maybe you have a cottage food license that you're doing on your farm as well. And then we get down to things like land clearing debris and livestock mortalities. Low-grade wood. Again, the blue is all things that have been added, and the red are things that have been taken out or replaced. So yeah, manure and bedding, that has a very specific definition. And then a key new one for us is this meat processing waste definition. So I'd encourage just taking a read through that, understanding what all that means. It also came up on the call what the definition for on-farm means. So you can find that definition right here. It means activities per this draft of the rulemaking, means activities taking place on any agricultural land under the control of the same entity, including parcels that are not geographically contiguous. So there was a question about, I have my poultry operation, can I compost on a different piece of land that's still part of that operation? So that would be with reference to a definition like this. Yeah, so I would just honestly scroll, if you have time, scroll through as much of the definitions as you can. Kind of interesting. And then from the definition section, we will turn to page 75. And on page 75, we start section 220, which is the section that relates to composting facilities, including permit exemptions. So you can see what the standards apply to. Doesn't apply to anaerobic digesters. And then there's this section with a bunch of red lines through it. So I would go in for the black and blue text because that's what's going to look like in the future. So it says, for the purpose of the subsection, material on site at any one time includes feedstocks, active composting, curing piles, and composted materials. And then after kind of all of this information about who and what this all applies to, you get to the table of the exemptions. So as Don Marie mentioned, there is this very small exemption for all organic wastes. There's a slightly larger one for organic feedstocks, including some food waste. But we may be most interested in this number 4 exemption, which is the exemption for meat processing or food processing waste. So you can read through what the conditions are for that, up to 250 cubic yards material on site, not to exceed 1,000 cubic yards in a calendar year. And that who it applies to and what you have to do in order to operate under that exemption. And I've linked the form in that same follow-up email that you would be asked to fill out by Department of Ecology to operate under this exemption. There's also one for yard debris and general ag waste, which again, this includes mortalities. And then the last one that might be of interest is the animal mortalities from disaster. Hopefully you never have to use this exemption, but if you were to have some sort of emergency event or mass die-off, it's good just to know that this is here and that this could potentially exist if this rule gets adopted in this form. After this, as Don Marie pointed out, there are still conditions that you have to comply with, even if you're operating under one of those exemptions. So good to take a look at those. There's a limit of physical contaminants, so things like plastic, metals, to no more than 2% by volume. But as Don Marie mentioned, if you're getting just carcass waste, you're probably going to have pretty clean feedstocks to begin with. And then the rule goes into a whole bunch of different rules that apply to composting facilities. So good to know about, but if you're not planning on operating a permitted facility, we'll jump down real quick to page 104, which goes over the testing requirements, or at least the testing parameters that you have to meet in order to be able to distribute your compost. So again, if you're interested in compost sales or distribution, it would be good to familiarize yourself with this information. And then if we go down to page 122, we start that other section I mentioned, the other organic materials handling activities. And those are for things that are not composting, not landfilling, not anaerobic digestion. So if you're using some sort of new technology or you're doing vermicomposting or black soldier fly production, these regulations may apply to you. So just so that you know where they are, if that is something that is of interest to you. I know there's some small meat processing facilities situated on farms that might be interested in something like a on-site aerobic thermophilic digester or some of these other technologies. So just to shout out for where that lives in the rule. And then there's a bunch of other standards. Again, the best, most comprehensive way to get information is going to be to go through the entire rule. But I wanted to just highlight these couple of sections that I think are particularly relevant to our small livestock farms and meat processors. So once you have gone through the rule, if you have feedback that you're interested in sharing, you don't have to share any feedback with the Department of Ecology, but you'll go back to the same main rulemaking webpage and then scroll down to the current comment period. And you can click comment here. And it will take you to a section or to a form where you can share what your thoughts are. Again, Dunmary invited you to share, what you like about the code, because there may be people that are advocating against it and they want your opinion as well, what you would like to change, and any other feedback that you might be able to, that you might have. I was also just going to point out that if you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you can look at other people's comments. So maybe this is your first time commenting and you're not sure what that looks like. I think this is a good way to look through and see, what other folks have commented and just get a vibe of what people are interested in with this particular rulemaking. And you can see comments from prior iterations of, prior informal comment periods on the main page as well. So again, yeah, if you click here, this is from the one that was in the summertime. That rulemaking, that in comment period is closed, but you can see folks's comments if you're interested in where we've been so far in the process. Lastly, Chris is listed as the program coordinator, but Dunmary also mentioned on the call that you're welcome to reach out to her. I'm available if you have questions about, how to navigate this. Thanks so much. Bye.